Hello fellow aviators and welcome back to the channel to discuss all things aviation. Angelo Dube welcoming you back. You might have noticed I scaled down from 2 episodes per week to 1 episode per week. That's a temporary measure. I will go back to 2 episodes per week as soon as my schedule opens up. Right now things are crazy, things are hectic, things are upside down. I have to maintain the one broadcast per week schedule until all is well, and then back to 2 videos per week. But now here's the thing, 2020 is about to end and we all don't know where it went to. The year basically simply disappeared on us, and we're now in October, approaching December. The year will be over, and where did the year go to? So one of the questions I get from most aspiring aviators, those people in matric or those people in their high school, is, in light of what has happened in 2020, what should I do next? Should I proceed from matric or high school straight into university, or straight into the flight academy? Now, that's not an easy question to answer, and it all depends on a number of factors. Now, we all know that in South Africa we do not have what you call an aviation university per se. So you cannot really get an aviation degree in the sense that other countries do, where you graduate with a degree in one area of study or another, coupled with you coming out with your pilot license at the same time. We do not have that. You have the choice to either go to university, traditional university, get your bachelor's degree in whatever, accounting, law, medicine, whatever it is that you decide to study, or you go the flight route way, where you go to a flight training organization and there you train and get assessed and get your license. So we don't have what other countries have. So the choice is critical for South African students to make, to either go to university proper or to go into a flight training academy. You recall from an earlier video that we presented here that you can get your student pilot license at the age of 16. You can then legally be competent to apply for your private pilot license at the age of 17, and commercial pilot license by the age of 18, and by 21 you can then apply for your ATPL, Airline Transportation Pilot License. That's holding all things constant, provided you pass everything you need to pass, the theoretical exams, you pass your assessments, and the finances are there, and the motivation is there for you to keep pushing these things and finish within the timelines I've just stated. So that's why it's critical for young people in that age range to actually make the right decision on whether to go to university or to go to flight academy. Now, whichever way you take, the number of years that you will spend will pretty much be the same. They'll be in the same, period range or length range. University will take you plus minus 4 years for a bachelor's degree. That's pretty much the time you might take to move from your first license all the way up to ATPL, provided you have the necessary funding and the motivation, and you are dedicated. You are simply cranking it all the way to the end, and you're able to fly pretty much anytime you want. So it gets critical therefore for high schoolers to decide what to do after high school, because it will pretty much take them the same amount of time to complete whatever route they decide to embark on. But let's try and unpack what would influence such a decision. In other words, as a person finishing high school, how should you take this forward? Which way should you go? What should influence your decision, whichever way you decide to go? Whatever you choose, whether you start with flight training first or you start with university first, the beauty of it all is that once qualified, that is your qualification. It's yours to keep. Of course, with aviation, you have to keep maintaining some of your ratings and your competency. But as far as the bachelor's degree is concerned, once it is bestowed upon you, it's yours for life. It's yours for you to keep. So should anything go bad in aviation in the future, you can always fall back on the your initial training on that bachelor's degree and look for employment elsewhere and be gainfully employed, and life continues. So it's more of it's sort of a buffer, a backup in case of anything that happens. Which one should come first? Of course, it depends on the prevailing global trends. You need to do your research. You need to look at what's happening globally before deciding one way or the other. For instance, before 2020, the global demand for pilots was rising. There was a need for pilots everywhere on the globe. Airlines were running short of pilots because senior captains were retiring. There was a gap in the training schedules, and there would be a time where airlines would not have sufficiently qualified pilots. They would be out there looking for newly qualified pilots. But that was pre-2020. The demand was high. It made sense to simply decide to go to flight training academy after your high school. But is it still the same now? You need to constantly be in tune with what's happening in the world. That's why, as an aspiring pilot, you need to be aware of your environment. You can't just say, I don't watch the news, I don't read the news, I don't do 1, 2, 3. You need to be aware. You can't be an ignorant pilot. You need to know what's happening in order for that to influence the decisions that you make. So check the global trends. Is there still a global demand for pilots, or has that waned in light of prevailing circumstances? So pre-2020, yes, we know there was a global demand. I believe there still is, but you need to factor in the impact of COVID. That's the second point. The impact of COVID-19 on the need for more flight training. So regarding the impact of COVID-19, we know that the industry has suffered in the past. It has suffered similar calamities. 2001, the American bombings, where some fellas flew jets into American buildings and crashed into those buildings and killed a number of people, and that shook the industry a little bit, and it shook the willingness of people to fly. So there was a little bit of suffering there, but remember, that was just an American issue. It wasn't a global issue. Yes, the repercussions might have been almost global, but they were not really totally global, because it was clear that this anger was directed at the Americans. So people were not really that much perturbed with flying after the 9/11. This is up for debate. You can take it either way, but that's just my opinion. It was not a global issue, it's an American issue, and therefore the effect was not the same. But there was one instance around 2008 that was almost a global issue. In fact, it was a global issue because it affected the financial system, the global financial system. That credit crunch, where the global financial system was affected by some irregularities that started in America. Why am I even calling it irregularities? This was just corruption happening in America, and therefore affecting the rest of the world, the banking system in the rest of the world. Therefore, the world going into a recession, the world taking a credit crunch, and people losing jobs, not enough money doing the rounds, and therefore airlines were not making profits. People didn't have much disposable income to travel. The desire to travel was no longer a primary need for people. So airlines could not have the demand they need to keep them afloat. So that affected the demand for pilots globally, because for airlines to need to recruit more pilots, there must be a high demand for people to be flown from point A to point B. When people don't have the money to fly from point A to point B, that demand is not there, and therefore the global demand for pilots also begins to go down. So in such a circumstance, training to become a pilot does not necessarily make sense in the short term. But remember, these things are always changing. Just like it changed after that, and there was now a huge demand after that credit crunch for pilots globally. So such things will influence your decision on whether to go to the flight academy now, or to go to university first, or to actually do them both at the same time. So Corona, just like the two instances I've mentioned, affected the global financial system as well. But it is slightly different from the two, in the sense that when you're dealing with Corona, number one, people lost jobs. Therefore, they don't have the money to travel. If people don't travel, then there's no need for airlines to provide routes. In other words, there's no demand for airlines to provide a service. If there's not demand for airlines to provide a service, there's no demand for pilots to be hired. So you might be right in saying that the one impact of COVID has been to slow down the global demand for pilots, so that flight training in the short term might not necessarily look appealing. But remember, these things improve with time. But the second point with Corona is that not only has the demand slowed down because of people losing jobs, people are also dealing with two factors. One, a psychological factor, the second one, a physiological factor. COVID-19 really hit some countries, especially in the north, very, very hard. Europe was hard hit, America was hard hit, Africa to some extent. The fact of the matter is that physiologically people get sick as they travel, as they contract the disease across regions. So people will not want to travel. Also, once Corona has passed and it's now safe to travel, people will still be dealing with the psychological element. The fact that people are scared of traveling, even if now they have the money to travel, they will be scared of traveling. Once people are scared of traveling, the demand is low. If the demand is low, why would airlines hire pilots? So those are things to consider. But that doesn't mean you must sit back, fold your arms, and close the book on aviation training. Remember, the industry will bounce back. When it does, make sure that you are ready. Take the time between now and the bouncing back of the industry to prepare yourself for what will potentially be a boom or a surge in the demand for global, in the global demand for pilots. So whether you go through university now or you go through flight training now, the number of years you're going to take might almost mirror the number of years that the industry might take to come around and start, experiencing a demand in the supply of pilots globally. So whichever route you take, factor that into the equation. If you can, of course, some people are, blessed in the sense that they do have the necessary wherewithal to go to university while at the same time pursuing their flight training. We know that flight training is extremely, extremely expensive. I'm speaking here from the perspective of the ordinary African child. I know it's totally expensive for them. It's difficult for them. That's why most of us would rather first go to university, get a job, and then using that job pay for our aviation training. But that's just the one route you could take. But if you are fortunate and you have the necessary funding, then you can choose your flight training. By the time you finish, the industry will have recovered. Keep that positivity in your mind and keep going. Things will go your way. Or if you can go to university and then fly part-time. It will take you the same amount of time to finish your by the time you graduate from your bachelor's degree, you could be finishing your last license in aviation. That's also doable. It's possible. It's all about dedication. It's all about commitment. And if the resources are there, why not? Go for it. So, but if you do go to university now, if you choose to go to university at this point and postpone your flight training to later, that too is fine. But again, if you choose to go to flight training and do your university later, that also is fine. You could get your licenses now. By the time the industry opens up, you would have gotten the amount of hours needed, the little bit of experience you would need for you to be attractive to any airline. And once you join that airline, university doesn't mean traditional contact university where you have to go and sit in front of a lecturer in a lecture room and get lectured. You could do this using a distance learning. You could attend a part-time university where you attend online, for instance, or some other form of distance learning that they provide while you're working for the airlines. It's possible. In this life, we shouldn't put things into straitjackets, into pigeonholes. You can do almost anything, whatever combination you choose. The decision is yours, but whatever you choose, just make it work for you. But if you choose flight training first and then university later, just know that it is doable. People will tell you otherwise, but I think we shouldn't let the laziness of people influence us into taking things that are scary for them, because they make their fears our fears. So if you choose flight training now, don't panic. You can actually learn via distance learning later on. I hope this has been a useful video for our followers who have been asking these questions, particularly in the South African context, because matriculants want to know what they should do next in light of COVID-19, in light of the global, scattering of the industry. I'd like to urge you to continue to support the channel by subscribing and liking the videos. It helps the channel to grow, and it's the only way we can grow it. It's the only way we can reach out to the African child, because remember, we can make Africa great again if each and every one of us does their bit. Remember that with every hour the Cockpit beckons. Whatever hour it is, keep adding those hours. An hour of flying, an hour of studying, an hour of interaction with other fellow like-minded aviators. It will eventually get you to the cockpit. With every hour the Cockpit beckons. Angela Dube here signing out and saying until next time, cheers.